Well, welcome back to the weekly yarns, the first weekly yarn of 2023. First of all, can I say Happy New Year to every single one of my viewers. I hope that this year is going to be very good and prosperous for every single one of us. Keep our fingers crossed, eh? Right, well, what have we been doing? Well, over the Christmas period has been really busy for us. Busy with tractors, as you see if you go back and have a look at our video on stripping the gearbox. We did get a break in the weather just before Christmas. I think it was Thursday, Friday, just before the Christmas. The weather did break, I think we got to 13 degrees at one point. So I took the opportunity to be able to get outside and strip that gearbox down to its major component level. The purpose of that was that once it stopped being an enormous lump, the components, the shafts, the bits and pieces could then be put onto my little workbench in the garage that I have and broken down into its individual components and cleaned and prepared and greased up and put back together ready for service. So as I say, that was Wednesday, Thursday. Some of it though was a bloody ball ache. If you go back to this video where I took the original gearbox to bits, that come to bits fairly easily, and actually if I think about it seriously, it probably come to bits fairly easily because somebody else had it to bits and not put it back together properly, because the tensions and everything on the pinion nut certainly weren't correct. Give you a little tip: if you're going to strip your gearbox out of the tractor and take it to pieces to the level that I've took mine to pieces, or even just have to remove the diff and the pinion shaft, before you take your gearbox out of the tractor frames, loosen the pinion nut. The pinion nut is on at 200 pound-feet. Out in my back garden here, I had to put a 1 meter breaker bar in between the spacer bars or the side rails of the gearbox on one side. I have a 3/4 breaker bar that must be best part of 2.5 feet long, and I had to put a pipe on the end of that, and I had to get Deb to lean on the breaker bar while I pushed on the pipe on the other end to get that nut loose. If you knew that before you took it out your tractor, you could use the weight of your tractor and your frames to stabilise the box and just crack the nut off. Just crack it a little bit so that you could then get at it, but you'll still have to chock it. You'll still have to put a piece of wood in the gears to chock it up to stop it from moving. But the little tip for you, another little tip, and I'll show you on the castings. I'm going to take you for a walk around in the garage. I went out half an hour ago, just by the way, I went out half an hour ago to have a look to do the yarn in the garage next to the tractor so I could show you the bits and pieces. It was blowing an absolute hooligan, to the point where I opened the garage door, put my lawnmower sideways against the garage door to keep the garage door open, and the wind moved the lawnmower and everything else, and the door slammed shut, and the noise because of the front roller shutter door wobbling is just horrendous in there. So and again, I went in with a camera, had a look. For whatever reason, I don't know what has changed in there, but something has changed, and the lighting in there today is just, there's lights and there's shadows and there's streaks all over the place. So I've come back in here. We'll do the yarn from in here today, and I'll show you some bits and pieces, and then we'll go into the garage and I'll show you what else we've got done. So anyway, back to me little tip, another little tip, and I'll show you it on the castings when we go into the garage in a minute. Your holes in the front casting that your detents go into, tape them up with masking tape before you start to take this to bits. Again, pop back to the video, you'll see me taking this gearbox to bits between Christmas and New Year. I've got all the detents and I've got the lockouts. Two of the detents are really by sheer luck. The first detent followed my punch out of the selector shaft hole, and I didn't see it. And it was on the floor lying beside me mats that I have, me judo mats. It was lying on the floor there, and that's where I found it. The second one flew out. It was the third detent. That flew out and hit us in the leg, and again dropped onto the mats. And then you think of it, just tape across the holes, stop it flying out sideways. It'll not stop it coming out of the holes that the selector shafts leave, but at least you've got more of a chance to see it or to control it that way. I normally, when I'm doing something fussy like that, I normally put a white sheet on the floor or a bit of cloth on the floor, so that anything small falls, it cannot roll away, it cannot get lost. It's sitting on that cloth somewhere, and then at the end of the day you pick the four corners up into a big, like a big hanky shape. Anything small would be in the bottom. That's just what I do anyway. So quick little tip for that. So as you see, we've got my gearbox stripped down, didn't we? And I broke it into its individual components, got on with my wire wheel. I produced a video for that, which I just released, what's today? Released on Thursday, didn't I? Thursday evening. I always said I wouldn't do a video on cleaning, because it's just wire wheeling and muck and filth and dirt. And I thought because it was the gearbox, I thought you might enjoy seeing that when it comes to bits and see what it is. The audio on it wasn't the best, because I didn't use my microphone and I didn't use me Tascam DR70D. I used my phone and I used the audio on the phone. And the reason for that is pretty obvious. If you look at my hands in that situation, I am up to the eyes in dirt, grit and diesel. And I don't want to be touching my sound equipment to switch it on or off, or my GoPro, with dirty, greasy, oily hands. I don't mind touching my phone, because as you know, I hate Apple gear. I've only got Apple gear because it's got a good camera on it. But that's why the audio is not clever on that. So apologies for that. But I hope it gets across the point of how we reduce that gearbox to its component level to get it cleaned and get it put back together. So the only bit we've got left to do for the gearbox, major bit, is the diff bearings to pull off. I think they're alright. I really do think they're alright, but I want to get them off the diff. I want to get at them and get them washed out properly. When you turn them, they turn freely, they turn smoothly, but just now and again, there's a click from some dirt or some muck that's deep inside the balls. And if you have a look at this picture, it shows you what the cage, the manufacturing of the cage is like. And it's difficult to get in. This is the old bearings off the old gearbox. You can see the muck that's in these, the sockets where the balls sit. Trying to get in there to get muck out when you can't get in because of the cage. The other side of that bearing is more open because it's got a taper lead in. This edge that you see on the outside here, this has got a thrust curve on it, and it's actually got written on the rim for the thrust side, so that's to put the pressure in to keep the diff in place with a pinion and to stop the lateral float on the diff cage on the opposite side. But I want the bearings off. I did price up, as I say in that video, I did price up the puller. They call it a triangular puller. It's a set of 3 knives that grip together to make one puller that go around the base of that bearing, the inner race. 750 quid. You know, that's obscene money, that, and I don't want to. I probably could get it off with a hammer and punch, but I don't want to start knocking on, because I don't think the bearings are that bad. I don't want to take the chance of damaging the bearing that could potentially go back in. Let's face it, they're not cheap, are they? Those bearings are not cheap, and if it can be washed out and saved, then why not do it? So what I did was I went on Facebook. There's a group on Facebook, Davy Brown Tractors, and I put a message on there if anyone in Northumberland could help us, and Raymond from Rothbury came back and said get in touch. So I will be getting in touch with him early next week, probably tomorrow. The reasons why I haven't been in touch with him at the minute was that over the Christmas everybody here was full of cold, and Gemma up at the farm ended up in hospital getting checked out by the medical staff New Year's Eve. So I didn't want to go up to Raymond last week and carry a load of germs up, because we've been up at the farm helping Gemma out with the farm and with the kids and everything, as you do as grandparents, as we all do as grandparents. But I didn't want to be carrying any viruses or illnesses up to Raymond up in Rothbury. So I thought I'd give it a week. If we're incubating anything, it'll come to a head. If not, Monday I'll give him a ring and we will make some arrangements, either to go and see him or have a conversation about these bearings. But we'll see. We'll talk to Raymond and get it sorted out. So New Year's Eve, I'm popping across to the farm there. The Vectra decides to go down onto 3 cylinders, and it's done this in the past. Anybody's got a Vectra, at least the 05 ones with a plastic cover over the top of the engine. If you go through a puddle of water and the water comes up off the wheels inside the engine bay, it can shoot up under the plastic cover onto the top of the engine. And I have had it where the water has gotten past the coil pack seals and getting down into the spark plug holes and shorted out the plugs, stopped them from working. And I thought that's all that happened, because we've had some really wet days this last couple of weeks. So I thought water's getting in there, stop the plug working, not a problem, I got sorted out when I get home. New Year's Day comes home, whips the plastic cover off, whips the coil pack out. Plugs 4, 3 were full of oil and 2 was half full of oil. So obviously the gasket that seals the valve cover, which is the next level down, the aluminium cover next level down, the gasket between that and the cylinder head had gone internally, allowing oil to flow through into the spark plug recesses even, and flood them out. So I was going to do a video of whipping the valve cover off the engine, replacing the gasket, putting it all back together. But then I started researching online, and I think, from memory, I think there's about 7 different types and shapes of gasket, depending upon what engine you've got. And my look in the past is, you quote the registration number and the people go, yeah, it'll fit that engine, that's perfect, it'll be fine. The parts turn up and they don't fit. So you end up having to pay postage to get them sent back, and then you get more, you've got to order more. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to whip the valve cover off the engine, we'll get a photograph, and I'll get this gasket off the photograph that I've got. And again, I was going to video that, taking the engine to bits, sorting it all out. I went out to do that, and like today, it was blowing a bloody gale, and it was freezing cold, which didn't help. But I thought I had to get the valve cover off because I wanted to physically see that gasket before I ordered one. So I whipped the valve cover off, had a look at you could see where the gasket had gone, you could see where it was bleeding through, and it had, as Vectras do, it had been leaking a little bit of oil out the front right hand corner, which passenger side, the front passenger side corner of the engine. that had been weeping for a little while, probably 2 years, because I think it's been noted on the MOT for the last couple of years that it had a slight oil leak. So anyway, we gets the cover off, takes the picture. Here's the photograph that I've got. Gets the photograph of the gasket. This is the nice new, and you can see how soft it is. This is lovely, isn't it? Can we see that? But that's the gasket that goes into that aluminium cover. I'll put that away before it gets damaged. So I ordered that, I think on Monday morning. I ordered it online Monday morning. And with it being over Christmas, New Year, and the postal disputes and everything else, the website did say it will be delivered on January the 9th. Well, lo and behold, January the 5th comes through my letterbox, doesn't it? Absolutely brilliant, guys. Eurocar parts, brilliant, guys. I love that. So we'll get that. We'll get I'll show you the aluminium cover I've got in the garage. We'll get the aluminium cover cleaned up. We'll get the block cleaned up. We'll get the new gasket put in, and we'll get the engine put back together, and we'll get it running again, because I like my little car. The old guy, you can see that this one, it's as soft as anything. Look at it. The old one, obviously original, came out in about 42 pieces. You weren't getting anything longer than that. It was extremely brittle. As soon as you got a hook in or a screwdriver in under the leading edge, it would just snap off a couple inches further down the way. Came out in a million bits. So, but anyway, over the moon with that. That was 13 or 14 quid for that gasket. Plus postage, plus VAT, of course. It ended up being just under 21 quid. But you know what? Keep your car on the road. 21 quid's not bad, is it? So we'll get that put in, and we'll get it back on the road again. Right, just before Christmas, Santa came again, just before Christmas. I think I've showed you this, haven't I? Spring in the pin. This is the spring for the depth control arm and the TCU control in the back of the rock shaft selector, and the little pin for the front end for the quadrant. But all that, and I haven't put them on, still haven't put them on, for the very reason that that's all coming off again to put this gearbox in. Because this gearbox cannot go in from the front. It cannot go in from the top down. Well, it can. It can go in from the front and the top down, but you've got to take the clutch shaft out and the clutch and everything back out, and it's a bloody nightmare. So it's actually easier and quicker to whip the axle case off the back and put the gearbox in from behind, and that's what we're going to do. As soon as we get this gearbox rebuilt, we'll get a nice day, we'll get that axle whipped off the back and the gearbox put back into place. So in respect of that, this here, there we go, that there is, I think Stuart said that was a quad ring. See, it's a seal. I'm looking at my phone to see if we can see that. It's a seal that goes into, that's the seal that goes into the shaft that the drive shaft that comes out of your clutch and into the gearbox. Then the muff shaft goes on to the gearbox. Then your cardan shaft comes in from the back, through your gearbox, through your muff shaft, through the clutch shaft, the input shaft, and into the clutch. As I said, this goes in between the clutch shaft and the cardan shaft, and it fits inside that output shaft from your clutch. Apparently there used to be felt washers in there. The felt was superseded by that. I didn't even know there was a felt washer in there, but until I looked at the parts, the exploded diagram, you see the felt ring on the exploded parts diagram. But again, then you start thinking, well, yeah, common sense tells you have to stop the oil going forward along the shafts, otherwise it'll end up in the clutch and just spray everywhere and the whole lot will become useless. So that's what that little seal does. It stops the oil creeping along your cardan shaft into your clutch and your bell housing. Two O-rings. 1, 2, part number 623579, both the same. They are for the ends of the rock shaft that fit into the selector chest. Okay, I only needed one, but I thought for the price of them and for the postage, it's easier just to get two, put one on the shelf just in case something happens. Or if we can get the actual, the bail arm knocked off the other side, pressed off the other side, we can put one of those on and we'll see. And this bit here, part number 913773. It is the disc off the other end of the rock shaft, left hand end of the rock shaft, where the cylinder is. On the opposite end there is the rock shaft itself, has got like a fulcrum arm on it with what locally is known as the donkey's dick on it, and it fits into the cylinder. This seals the castings on the other end, and I was told that these were obsolete and like hen's teeth, but I've managed to get a one. 913773. Those 4 items, 2 O-ring, seal and the disc, they came from Stuart at Barclay Williams. As I say, those discs apparently, people are saying they're no longer made, you can't get a hold of them. I think you can get a hold of anything if you just want to shop about enough for them. So, as I say, Stuart, Barclay Williams, that's where they came from. I had a question from Tom Hart out in Indiana, gaskets, and he's asking, at what point do you put a gasket in, seal the gasket with either grease, a Loctite product, I use Well Seal a lot, a Stag product, or RTV silicone. And I know this can be a contentious issue for a lot of people, but this is my personal opinion, and this is what I'm doing with this tractor. Number one, if you look in the handbook, sometimes it'll tell you what to use. It'll tell you it's got a gasket in, it'll tell you to dry fit it, it'll tell you to use Hylamar Blue, it'll tell you to use Well Seal, it'll tell you to use Loctite 515 for instance. Follow the directions in the handbook. If it's in the handbook, use the handbook. My little golden rules are, if it's something that is going to cause an enormous mess, something that I don't have to take off on a regular basis, such as front timing cover, sump, the push rod cover, tappet covers that's on the side of the engine. When I put the gaskets into them, and the gaskets come as part of the sets, when I put the gaskets in, I seal them in with Well Seal and do them up, because then I know I'm not going to get an oil leak, because they're sealed up, they're glued on. Those particular pieces, timing cover, sump, valves, tappet covers off the side, aren't going to come off 2-3 times a year, right? So you can put them on and lock them on. So the oil bowl underneath the tractor for the transmission oil and filter, I've greased the gasket that's on there. I made my own gasket for that. I made it out of 0.8 of a mil material, so it's fairly thick. I have proper gasket material, and I've greased both sides and I've put it together because I know that's going to come off again. It's nice thick material, so it's got a bit of give to deform into the shape of the ridges that's on that bowl. So I shouldn't get any leaks from there. The back axles, they are well sealed on. Again, I don't want any leaks in that area, because to solve a leak between your gearbox casting and your axle casting is a mammoth task. So when you're putting it together, I make sure that I don't want any leaks come from that area. I well seal that up. Now, I have heard the left hand side of the rock shaft mount where the cylinder and the hydraulic piston is, and the latch cap that goes on there. In the handbook it says use 515, Loctite 515 product on that to seal the two metal faces together. I've also seen in a handbook somewhere, and for the life of me I cannot find that picture again now, but I'll keep looking, and if I find it I will put it up, and it shows a gasket in there. Thinking about it, there's two bearings either side of that casting, isn't there? There's a one piece bearing on the left hand end, and there's a split bearing on the right hand side of that, the fulcrum arm for the cylinder, for the piston. If you start putting gaskets into that joint, you're going to oval the hole as opposed to have a round hole, and you're going to allow movement of the bearings, potentially movement of the bearings, and room for oil leaks. So when I put my latch cap back on, it will go on with 515. Is there any places that I don't put gaskets or any sort of sealer? Bell house casing down to the gearbox casing, the main gearbox casting to the engine block casting, and the tombstone to the front of the engine. I haven't put any sort of gaskets or sealers in there because you don't need them. They are just literally metal to metal, bolt them up. If you put gaskets in there, I wouldn't understand why you would need to put gaskets. There's nothing to put a gasket in for, but you do allow the castings that room to start and flex, and that's not good. The last thing you want is those joints flexing. You want them pulled up tight so they cannot flex. Silicon RTV type products, I would never ever under any circumstances put any of that in my engine at all, anywhere. Never. That's just too much can go. If you put too much on the joints and it goes in and it falls inside, it can block your oil galleries and block your cooling galleries. Nah, it's just not, it's a no-no as far as I'm concerned. But as I say, that's my personal opinion. It's entirely up to you what you want to do. But as I say, I have seen a lot. My Lister, for instance, when I rebuilt the Lister, the handbook told you every single type of joint and compound to put on every single joint. So you just follow the handbook. They have done their research. They know those compounds work on those joints for various reasons. Follow the handbook. Right, so let's go handheld for a minute, and we'll have a look at my garage, see what we've been up to. Castings off our gearbox. Right, your detents go down through these holes here. Your interlock goes in that hole there, right? Tape off across them. It'll stop the balls flying out and getting lost. As I say, the can, when they pop up through the springs, the can follow the selectors back out of here. But at least you know where they're going, don't you, in that respect. But I had it coming out of here. go back to the video, have a look at the video, and I pull the punch out of here, you don't actually see it follow the punch, but you do see it drop around about here. You just catch a quick glimpse of it flitting past, and if it hadn't been for these type of judo mats that I've got on here to stop it bouncing, we probably would have lost it, and then I would have been wondering where it had gone to. But yeah, tape them off. Your big, your 1 1/8 nut that's in here, loosen that, just crack it whilst it's sitting in the tractor, and the tractor's got a hold of the frames to stop it moving. If you're on your own, you know what I mean. But that's all I can do. A quick little tip here. I thought I had another one to show you. Nylock nut. If you're looking at that nylock nut, white nylon will tell you that's an imperial nut. If that was blue nylon, it's a metric nut. Alright, so just a quick tip, if you're searching through your box of nuts and bolts and you're looking for either metric or imperial nylocks, white's imperial, blue is metric. So this sorry looking thing at the moment is the valve cover off my engine out of my Vectra. That gasket that I was showing you sits in obviously round here. Spark plugs come through here down at the engine. What had happened was this had failed. Oil from either side here, because you've got your valves and your camshafts operating in here. The oil had seeped through, you can see here where the oil's come through. Came through into this area and flooded out the plugs. As you see, this all needs a really good bath, and we'll get this put back together. When I was taking the gasket out, you couldn't get that length out in one piece. You'd start here and it would lift to here, and then it would just fracture. And you can see why I had to lift that case off first, because there are so many different shapes here. For instance, that gasket comes in and goes all the way around here, and it joins across. There's a square here, there's a link across here, there's a recess here. It's very intricate, and there are so many different shapes and sizes, it's unbelievable. The one thing this aluminium cover doesn't have is the two metal dowels at the front that the plastic cases have. On the plastic cases there are two dowels at the front here that are made of steel that go down into the aluminium head. And obviously you've got galvanic corrosion going on between dissimilar metals, and these dowels and the screws, the bolts that come through, seize in, so you end up with the plastic ones nearly always smashing the eyes out of the front of the case and having to get new cover, new nuts, and hopefully you get the bolt and the dowels out of the block without damaging the block. Right. So here's what bearings. See, you can you hear that? Wait a minute. Let's get the microphone down here. It's just every now and again I could spin that for 10 minutes and it would be perfectly quiet. And then once you'll get a click, as if there's a little bit of grit in the cage that's moved, just getting under the ball or in between the races. But honestly, and that's why I don't want to knock them off. I don't want to start hitting on them with hammers. What's that number there? There's a number there. $170GW. So as I say, I don't want to start hitting on them and damage them. The size of them bearings, I can see them going to be expensive. I know they're just balls, but it's the fact that balls and thrusts at the same time. So as I say, I think that's going to end up being expensive bearings, and something that I don't need to spend if I can avoid it. You know what I mean? Right, so here we've got the latch cover off the left hand side of the rock shaft. As I say, I have seen in a manual a drawing of this casting with a gasket in here and in here. In true Blue Peter foam, here's one I made earlier. So we made some gaskets to go on there. Then I read in the handbook, don't put gaskets in. Seal this with Loctite 515 on here, put it on the back. That's 0.4 of a mil material. Now even if you put that in there and you squeeze it, even if you can squeeze it down to 0.2, this is going to take these holes out of round, and you're going to end up with a slight change in shape of the bearings in here, which could cause oil leaks or could cause the bearings to fail. So I'm not going to put those gaskets in when this goes back on. This is going to go back on, as it says in the instructions, with 515 or a similar product on that face. That's gaskets going in around the gearbox lid and onto the steering column, where the steering column sits on top of the gearbox lid. As you can see here, look at this. We're starting to get an awful lot of surface rust. Came in this morning to prep the garage for the video, and the lighting here, for whatever reasons, is just not good at the minute. I need to sort it out. During that cold snap that we had, which was about a week, wasn't it? We had a lot, as soon as the weather warmed up, we had a lot of condensation formed on the engine and on some of the castings. I came in this morning to prep the garage for to do this yarn, but found out that the light was atrocious and it wasn't going to happen anyway. But then I spent about an hour scrubbing off bare metal surface rust. And the only thing and everything in here, everything that is not painted in here, it was covered in oil. Now, it's either the covers that I'm putting on the tractor are soaking the oil up. This oil is soaking into the castings, which you can because cast iron's porous. But anyway, I had to spend about an hour with the Scotch-Brite scrubbing off all the surface rust, and I've just seen that there on that gearbox casing, but that'll get sorted when I come to put the box in. But I spent an hour scrubbing all the surface rust off, and I put grease on all the bare faces that I can find down the back end here now. When I come to put the gearbox in and I get this off that wall, then I'll have a look at that side and we'll get that side done as well. I'm not so fussy about the nuts and bolts going rusty, because they will come back out one at a time and get wire wheeled again before this gets its final coat of paint. Because obviously we're working on it, it's getting chipped and scratched and everything, and it's going to need one more coat of paint for to get it finished off. So if you found the video useful, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. It costs you guys absolutely nothing to subscribe, and it does help us out tremendously in making the channel grow. So, as I say guys, thank you very much for visiting. That's it for this week. We'll see you hopefully through the week with another video, either fixing the engine, fixing the gearbox, whatever. We'll see what we can get done. Obviously, a lot depends on the weather, doesn't it? But remember, don't overthink it. It's just nuts and bolts. See you in the next one. Thanks very much. Stay safe now.